So welcome once again, for those who might not have been here right at the beginning. This afternoon, we're going to be looking at the issue of Palestinian child prisoners. There's going to be a short film, followed by a brief presentation by Sosan from DCI Palestine. That will be followed by a presentation by a former child prisoner, and then there'll be a chance for some questions. Could you please put your questions in the chat? Do please also use the chat to make any comments, any contributions you'd like to make towards the afternoon. If you'd like me to ask the question for you, please indicate that. Before we show the film, I'd just like to say a couple of things about the psychological and emotional developmental context of child detention. Just a reminder, by the way, that this is being recorded. So the two greatest fears most children have, either conscious or unconscious fears, and whatever their circumstances, are the terror of abandonment and or obliteration. Children who live in situations of uncertainty, danger, with the possibility of imminent injury or death, don't have the opportunity for ordinary developmental separation and individuation. They live constantly with those two primary sources of terror, abandonment and obliteration. Children at risk of detention, abduction, imprisonment, maltreatment have their emotional, psychological, and sometimes physical development compromised. For Palestinian children, their place of safety, the home, is vulnerable to invasion by heavily armed soldiers, usually in the early hours of the morning, with a terrifying and shocking awakening from sleep. Adolescents are forced back into the role of the helpless child, their bodies no longer their own. Their physical integrity is lost, taken over by others who wish them harm. At the time when a child's body should be very private, it can become the focus of shame, embarrassment, humiliation, and exposed to the eyes of hostile strangers, not just their eyes, but their fists and their boots. Children's bodily functions become on public display. They may be unable to control their bladder or their bowels when in a state of terror, and they may not be allowed to use the toilet. Their rapid loss of confidence in their parents to protect them comes too prematurely before the natural stage of disillusion that comes upon all of us in adolescence, when we discover over time that our parents are not the idealized versions we had believed them to be. The combination of having no safe place, no secure base, the loss of parental protection, public humiliation and shame, along with the trauma of the violent wrenching from their family, abandonment, the fear of death, obliteration, with terrifying adults who visit violence upon their bodies, is shocking and outrageous. Prolonged separation, injury, isolation, body shaming take their toll. And these children may emerge from detention having developed a number of physical and psychological defenses, maybe continuing their own isolation, their rage at perceived slights from others, an inability to have physical or emotional contact, withdrawal from the world, nightmares, wetting and soiling, mutism, depression, excessive bravado, mania, aggression, hatred of vulnerability in others, dissociation, substance misuse. The list goes on and on. The routine sadism and carefully timed assaults on a child's home and family are just one part of the systematic brutalization of children in order to break their spirit, disrupt their attachments, and destroy their capacity to relate to others. This afternoon, we're going to have a look at some facts and figures and hear from somebody who went through this appalling treatment. So we're going to show the film, first of all, and then, Susan, if you could go into your presentation. Thank you.
أول شيء بقيت أفكر كيف بدي أطلع، كيف بدي أمشي أيامي. تحسك إنك لما بقيت جوا بقيت منعزل عن العالم الخارجي تماماً.
عندك خوف إنك تنسجن كمان مرة ولا كيف؟
تعرف شو المشكلة الرئيسية؟ خط 60 إنه بس كيف تقطع وتوجه لهم لأنه عند خط 60 هم ملك الشارع. أنا عبيد أكرم جوابرة، مخيم العروب، شمال الخليل. عمري تقريبا 15 سنة وبحب أطبخ. عندك مخيم العروب كله دور صغيرة وعدد الأفراد اللي فيها كبير كثير ومساحة الدور صغيرة، حتى إنه الشباك مثلا بيفتح على شباك جارك، يعني الحيط في الحيط زي ما بسموها. وعندك توقك صغيرة، وعندك برضو الناس فيها كثير طيبين، كثير مناح جدعان، بوقفوا معك في المشاكل. فيش حياة الأطفال مأساوية، لا في ألعاب زي العالم، لا في حرية. تم اعتقالي مرتين من قبل الاحتلال. عندي كانت التجربة الأولى مأساوية جدا، حتى كنت أنا ماشي أروح على الدكان أشتري، اعتقلوني. لما اعتقلوني في مركز التحقيق حطوا لي كلبش بلاستيك، كلبشتين نفس الشيء في نفس الإيد، حتى كان دقيقة ما بقدرش أحرك إيدي لا لفوق ولا لتحت. وكان حطوا لي عصب خميلة وحتى حطوها لمنخار، يعني ما قدرتش أتنفس بصعوبة. تعرف لما تمشي وأنت مش شايف إشي، طريق غريب، ضلك ماشي وضلك في دايخ وخايف ومتردد. حتى هم كانوا مثلا يقول لي انزل الدرج، بقاش في درج، ارفع رجلك خلوني أقع. بس طبعا كان ما يضربش إلا على المناطق الغير حساسة، حتى ما تشهدش ضدهم أو تثبتش إشارة ضدهم. صارت أشياء كثير لما وقفت في السجن وروحت شفت أشياء كثير متغيرة. لما رجعت كانت المواد كلها متراكمة جدا علي، حتى إنه ما عرفتش لا أختار لا هذا ولا هذا.
عبيدة هاي مثلا ترتبها شوية هيك، لأن في عنا أنواع يتم تشتيلها بالبذور، في عنا أنواع بالفسائل بالعقل، كويس؟ هاي مثلا نوع من أنواع النبات يتم تشتيله إيش؟ من خلال النبت نفسه. في عنا التكاثر الجنسي وفي عنا التكاثر اللاجنسي، كويس؟
فرحت على الصناعية عشان المواد برضو كانت المواد متراكمة جدا، وعملوا لي امتحانات شهرين فتغلبت كثير. كنت كل يوم بقيت أقرأ كل كتاب.
لما تشعل شو بتعمل؟ تبعد إيدك 2 ميلي.
إنه أجيب علامات عالية، إنه أثبت وجود، إنه ما راحش تعبكوا وهيك، ما راحش إنكم قبلتوني، راح تأثر علي في السجن.
بس
أنا رشيد عرار، المرشد المهني لمدرسة العروب الزراعية. وزي ما احنا شايفين هون هذا الشارع، شارع 60 اللي بمر منه كثير من المستوطنين اللي بيعملوا لنا إشكالية كبيرة في هذا المكان، لأنه احنا موجودين على
إيش هذا الصوت؟
هذا الجرس. احنا موجودين على منطقة احتكاك بيؤدي لانه مرات يصير في اعتداءات من قبل قوات الاحتلال على الاطفال، اعتقالات، مداهمات للمدرسة. الأطفال أول ما بيجوا سواء كان معتقل قبل ما يجي عنا أو بيتم اعتقاله عنا وبعدين بيلتحق بالمدرسة، بنجد إنه في صعوبة أثناء دمجه مع الطلاب. يعني مش بالسهل إنه يتفاعل، مش بالسهل إنه يبني علاقات، مش بالسهل إنه يبني صداقات. مرات عنده ردات فعل مش محسوبة. هذا الموضوع بنشتغل عليه على إنه نعيده لتوازنه، نعيده لإنه يرجع يندمج مع الأطفال، يبني علاقات، ينتظم بالمدرسة، يتخلص من بعض السلوكيات اللي شوي بتأثر عليه من ناحية سلبية.
بلشت أفكر ليش إحنا غير عن أطفال العالم، ليش بس تعيين فلسطين بروحوا بتسجلوا أعمارهم صغيرة وبندهكوا في الحياة، وهم غانم مبسوطين بروحوا على جيم، على كرة سلة، على تدريبات، عندهم إمكانيات كثير أحسن منا. كنت أقارن كيف ليش هم هيك وإحنا هيك. هذا السؤال لحد الآن ما حدا جاوبنا عليه. ليش رحت الزراعة الكلية هذه؟
نباتي وعشان الحيواني والنفع علاقات تدور.
أنا تعرف ليش رحت؟ عشان أشتغل المواد العلمية، فيزياء وكيمياء وأحياء،
صعوبات كثير.
أنا شربت منهم. ومنيح الزراعة، يعني وظيفة محترمة ورا مكتب وتشتغل لحالك وقائد نفسك. أنا هذا الشيء اللي بحبه. دوك تكون ورا مكتب حتى يداوم عليك سوي هيك سوي هيك، تملك نفسك أحسن.
صحيح. لما كنا جوا بس نفكر، بس يوم نطلع محكمة عشان هيك نضيع وقت.
الزراعة
محكمة الزراعة.
قدر أشوف بلاد بلدنا قدر انبسط.
بلاد بلدنا ويوم للزيارات وهيك. يوم للزيارة تشوف أهلك. هاي الأشياء المنيحة في السجن، إنك شيء منيح هو، بس في أشياء بتعلمك إنه
زي الصبر في الامتناع،
تصبر، تنظم حالك.
كنت مروط انا بالسجن طبخ جوا. شوف بدك تعرف.
بعرف.
علمني الطبخ، حبني الشاب وعلمني الطبخ. وعندنا كان جابوا شيف من الأقسام الثانية إنه أطلع 3-2 معهم اسمه مساعد الطباخ، فاشتغلنا معه وعلمنا شغلة. تعلمت مهارة الطبخ، وتعلمت مهارة التعامل مع الناس، الأدب، الاحترام. بحس حالي حر، بس مش الحرية التامة. عندك لازم أول شيء تتحرر عشان أحس حالي حر تماما، بس برضه في عندك إنك حر تطلع وقت ما بدك، تيجي وقت ما بدك في التاكسي، تحكي ما بدك، تتزاحم ما بدك. كان عندك خلاص إرادة شخصية، شو بدك تسوي. أنا هذا كنت مفتقره جوا، بس واحد مش متحررين كيف بدي أعيش الفرحة تمام 100%، يعني حتى جزء من الفرحة اكتملت.
Susan, would you like to speak?
Thank you so much, and thank you very much for inviting us to speak today. I hope that you learned something from that film, which was very kindly made for us by Matthew Cassell. So my name is Sousan, and I'm the UK Advocacy Officer at DCI-Palestine. I've been working for DCI-Palestine on and off for about 9 years, and I'm really happy to say that last year we finally launched a permanent presence in the UK. We already have a presence in Canada and the US, as well as, of course, in the West Bank. So if you don't know about Defence for Children International Palestine already, we're a local Palestinian NGO, and our work is divided into the child protection and accountability programs, and I'm part of the advocacy team that operates within the latter. So our accountability program involves extensive documentation of the Israeli military detention system, settler and soldier violence, threats to the right to a childhood, which includes documenting how the occupation and its components like checkpoints or demolitions, settlement expansion and violence, and the closure of Gaza impacts education, housing and health as they relate to children. We also document incidents of child recruitment by both Israeli and Palestinian actors and the ill treatment in the Palestinian juvenile justice system. But today we've been invited to speak specifically about the military detention of Palestinian children whose experiences we document and to whom we provide legal representation. So you may already know that Israel has the dubious distinction of being the only country in the world that automatically and systematically prosecutes children, specifically Palestinian children, in military courts that lack fundamental fair trial rights and protections. Israel prosecutes between 500 and 700 Palestinian children in military courts every year. So we estimate that since 2000, Israeli military authorities have detained, interrogated, prosecuted and imprisoned around 13,000 Palestinian children. Since 1967, Israel has also operated two separate legal systems within the same territory. In the occupied West Bank, Israeli settlers are subject to the civilian and criminal legal system, whereas Palestinians are subject to military law. Israeli children, even those residing in the illegal settlements in the occupied Palestinian territory, never come into contact with the military court and detention system. So Palestinian children in the Israeli military detention system are overwhelmingly subjected to violence and ill treatment that is widespread and systematic. Between 2014 and 2019, we collected affidavits from 752 Palestinian child detainees. Over half were arrested at night. Almost all were not informed why they were being arrested. Almost all of them had their hands and feet bound and were blindfolded. About 72% of children were subjected to physical violence and 61% to verbal abuse, humiliation or intimidation during or after their arrest. 3/4 were strip searched. Children in the Israeli military detention system are not allowed a lawyer during interrogation. So almost every child was also denied a parent present during an interrogation. Over half of children were shown or forced to sign a confession or other document in Hebrew, which is a language most Palestinian children cannot understand. Since 2016, at least 108 Palestinian children have been held in solitary confinement, in one case for 32 days. Our evidence overwhelmingly shows that solitary confinement is practiced solely to obtain a confession or to gather intelligence, and we've found no evidence of any legally justifiable use of solitary confinement of Palestinian children. We released a report in December which documented every single one of those cases, which you can read on our website. An average of 2 Palestinian children are held under administrative detention orders each month, although currently 3 children are held under administrative detention orders. This is a form of imprisonment without charge or trial, so children who are held under these orders are never presented with charges, and their detention is based on secret evidence that neither they nor their lawyer can see. So children held in this way have no legal means of challenging the detention and the alleged basis for it. This amounts to a denial of a fundamental due process right. In January, Israeli authorities issued a 6-month administrative detention order against a 17-year-old called Amal Nekler. He was arrested from his home at around 3:30 in the morning on January 21st in Ramallah. His detention was extended for 72 hours by an Israeli military court judge at Ofer Military Court, and then on January 25th, a 6-month administrative detention order against him was issued and accepted. He's currently detained at Israel's Megiddo prison. So Amal suffers from something called myasthenia gravis, which is a rare chronic autoimmune neuromuscular disease. It causes muscle weakness, including in the muscles used for breathing and swallowing. He requires ongoing, uninterrupted medical treatment and must remain under constant medical supervision. Complications associated with his condition are often sudden and life-threatening, so he has to be able to access a hospital at very short notice. Research also shows that people with the condition are at greater risk of worse outcomes if they get COVID-19. So DCI have confirmed 3 cases of COVID-19 in Palestinian children in Israeli custody. The most recent one was in January. It was a 14-year-old boy who was also detained in the early hours of the morning from his home in the occupied West Bank town of Beit Omar. He was first detained at Etzion Detention Center and then transferred to another prison, Megiddo prison inside Israel, where he tested positive for the virus. Several Palestinian children who've been detained since the outbreak have told us that Israeli soldiers did not take precautionary measures to reduce the spread of the virus. They didn't wear masks or gloves. The children were not medically examined or tested upon their arrival at facilities. They were transferred multiple times in this way. And they were often placed inside rooms, including with other children, that didn't contain cleaning supplies, hand soap, or adequate ventilation. So in these conditions, the chance of virus propagation is obviously greater. Psychological implications of The military detention of these children is obviously profound and can be long-term. And this is exacerbated by an insufficient specialized mental health and psychosocial support services. Palestinians also have the highest rate of mental health needs in the Eastern Mediterranean. A 2008 study of Palestinian mental health patients showed that more than a quarter of Palestinian children under 15 meet the criteria for PTSD. So in terms of what we can do in the UK, it's really important that we begin by highlighting to our elected officials, our elected representatives, that the inadmissibility of Israel's military courts for trying civilians. We need to ensure that MPs and the government recognise and keep repeating in all of its engagement with the government of Israel that in no circumstance should children be detained or prosecuted under the jurisdiction of military courts. But as a minimum safeguard, while Palestinian children continue to be arrested and prosecuted within the system, Israeli authorities must respect and ensure basic due process rights and an absolute prohibition against torture and ill treatment. From the moment of arrest, operations and procedures must be carried out in accordance with international juvenile justice standards, specifically the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, which Israel itself ratified in 1991. It's also important to emphasize that despite various degrees of engagement by UN bodies, the Special Representative of the Secretary General on Children in Armed Conflict, numerous NGOs like us, and governments, including the UK government, Israeli authorities have persistently failed to implement practical changes to end unlawful practices towards Palestinian children. This demonstrates why we need to continue to apply pressure and why the issue is still urgent and relevant. If you'd like to find out more about military detention and our campaign to end the military detention of Palestinian children, which is called No Way to Treat a Child, you can visit our website. We deliver No Way to Treat a Child in the US, Canada, UK, and at EU level, where we work with elected representatives, relevant government departments, and intergovernmental organizations to highlight and end this practice. You can also subscribe to receive emails and action alerts specific to the UK or the US and Canada, so you can hear about opportunities to take action and support our work wherever you live. I'll wrap up there and hand over to our guest speaker, who himself is a former child prisoner, and my colleague Manar, who's an international advocacy officer at DCI and who is supporting with translation. Thank you.
Manar, are you there? Manar, you're on mute.
Hi. Can you hear me? Hello?
We can hear you, Manar.
Okay, so Abed Sabah was detained in January. Will be telling us about his experience, and I will help translating Arabic to English and vice versa. Abed?
مرحبا، أنا عبد الرحمن حسن صبحي، عمري 17 سنة، من جنين غرب بركين غرب جنين. اعتقلوني ب 12/1/2021.
My name is Abdurrahman Sobah. I'm 17 years old and I was arrested in January 2021.
اعتقلوني ب 12/1 يوم الثلاثاء. كنت نايم في البيت وسمعت صوت انفجار قوي، فأنا خفت وارتعبت كثير، حيث قمت من الفرشة بالفراش. كان أبوي يتكلم مع 7-8 جنود، قد دخلوا فكعوا الباب ودخلوا البيت. فنادى علي أحد الجنود وباسمي، نادى علي أحد الجنود باسمي وأخذني على جنب. قال لي بدي سلاح، قال لي أنت في عندك سلاح؟ قلت له لا فيش عندي. كان حطني برا وصاروا يكسروا بالدار.
So it was almost 5 a.m. It was on Tuesday, January 12th. I was sleeping when I heard an explosion near the house. I woke up and I found around eight soldiers inside the house talking to my father. one of the soldiers came towards me, and he told me to bring my gun that I didn't have. بتفضل.
حيث قام أحد الجنود بوضع مرابط بلاستيكية على اليدين وتكسير البيت، وقاموا بتهديده بأن يكسروا الدار أو بتجيب السلاح اللي عنده. وبعدها تم اعتقالي ومشي حوالي 500 متر على الجيب العسكري، فوضعوني فيه.
When I told the soldier that I don't have any gun, he gave my father a warrant in Hebrew, an arrest warrant, and they tied my hands with plastic cord. They blindfolded me and they took me to the military jeep, where we walked for around 500 meters away from my home.
حطوني في الجيب وقعدوا يضربوا فيي، وانا فقط خفت وارتعبت كثير منهم، لانه كنت مكيت مغمغم وحاطين على عيني شو اسمه كماش، قطعه من القماش، فما عرفتش وين اخذوني. ماشوا وطول الطريق وهم يضربوا فيي وانا بكيت خايف.
As we were walking towards the military jeep, I was blindfolded and frightened because I didn't know where I was going. And the whole time they were beating me up until we arrived to the military jeep.
ضلوا يضربوا فيي حتى لحد ما وصلنا المعسكر، قعدنا تقريبا 3 ساعة نص ساعة وهم يضربوا فيي وانا ما بعرفش وين رايحين وين احنا ومين هدول.
I had no idea what was going on, where were we going. Even even on the way inside the jeep going to the military camp, I was beaten up, not knowing where we going or what was going on. تفضل عبد.
حيث قام بأخذي أخذوني إلى طبيب عنده وسألنا كم من سؤال طبي وجاوبت عليه إنه طلع فيش عندي أمراض. بعدها أخذوني إلى ساحة كبيرة وكانت تشتي الدنيا وأنا بكيت مش لابس واعي منيح، فأشتت علي وتبلبل نواعيي.
When we arrived to the
بالساعة تقريبا
When we arrived to the military camp, they took me to a doctor who examined me and told me that I don't have any diseases. And afterwards, they took me to an open area, and I wasn't wearing properly. It was super cold, and they kept me there.
بعد ما حطوني بالساحة أجا بعد 3 ساعات جندي حطني تحت مظلة، فكانت الدنيا شتاء لها. قعدت غياب تقريبا من الصبح للعصر تحت المظلة. بعد المظلة أجابوا سيارة البورصة وكلبشوني بيداي وجراي وحطوني بالبورصة تاعتهم. تم نقلي إلى منطقة بعرفهاش.
So I was under the rain for around 1 hour until one soldier came and took me under like a shelter, and I stayed for like 3 hours there until they came until a vehicle came and transferred me. I didn't know where I was taken.
حطوني بقفص حديدي وانا على الطريق وكنت مكلفش، حتى بقول لهم بدي اروح على الحمام ما خدونيش على الحمام، كنت زحمان وجعان ما عرفتش شو كنت دعما، ضلوا يهددوا فيي على الطريق.
So my hands were tied. I was hungry. I was feeling cold. I also was, you know, I needed to go to the toilet, but when I asked for all of these, none of them would listen or let me do any of these. أكمل عبد.
على طبعة إشي يخبط راسي بالقفص حديد. وأخروني على وجري بكن مش عارف أمد، محطوط بقفص مش عارف لا أتحرك لا يمين ولا شمال.
So in the BOSTA, which is the prisoner transfer vehicle, they put me inside a cage where I couldn't even, you know, sit in a comfortable position. I was like, my legs were hurting the whole time. The cage was open and it was raining and cold. I was feeling cold and not comfortable at all. تفضل عبد.
بعد نزلوني من القبر، أخذوني عند الطبيب، عملوا لي فحص، صار عندي 100 خوف. خايف هدول مجانين بلاش يقتلوني لأنه بيضلوا يهددوا فيي، نطخ أبوك نهد داركم. أنا بقيت خايف. بعد أخذوني على الزنزانة مترين بمترين.
So the whole time they were threatening that they would kill my family. I was very frightened. I was afraid of their threats. That all happened when we were going to in the military vehicle, and then they took me to a solitary confinement cell, which was 2 by 2 meters. 2 meters square.
حطوني بالغرفة هاي، غرفة صغيرة ضيقة كثير. غرفة حطوني فيها صغيرة ضيقة كثير بتخوف، يعني أشياء لغير خوفها. كنت خايف متعب، لا عارف وين أنا ولا عارف شو أعمل ولا عارف ليه أنا ليه يعني وين تطلع وين مش عارف إيش بكيت.
The solitary confinement cell was it was very scary for me. It only had one yellow light. I was thinking the whole time, why am I here? When am I gonna be out? What's gonna happen next? I didn't know anything. All I can remember is that I was feeling frightened.
كان فيها فرش واحد وفيش حرامات ولا شيء، وأنا بكيت مبلبل ووعي وعيتوا لي المبلبل مش منيح، وبكيت جعان وجيبوا لي أواعي ما قبلوش ولا جيبوا لي حرامات ما قبلوش.
I was all wet. My clothes were wet. There was only one mattress, no blankets, nothing. I asked them for new clothes, dry clothes, but they refused.
آخر الليل جابوا لي لبن صغير خبز صغير مش إشي يعني، مع يعني أكلت وضليت جعان وناديت عليهم طلبت منهم أكل ما كبروش جيبوا لي كمان.
At the night, they brought me a very small portion of food, like a small piece of bread with yogurt. I ate them, and afterwards I felt hungry, so I asked them for more food, but they refused to bring me. تفضل عبد.
قعدت فيها 10 أيام تقريبا، حتى ثاني يوم جابوا لي محقق، بكيت ميتك عم بكيت ليلتها بعدني مش نايم من الخوف.
عبد صوتك بيقطع، ما سمعتك.
هذاك اليوم يوم أليم، كنت خايف كنت مرتب. حتى ثاني يوم أجا عندي محقق، بكيت سكعان، قلت له بدي حرام ما قبلش يجيب لي.
That was a horrible day. I was very scared and cold. I was feeling cold the whole time. The next day, an interrogator came to me. I asked them for blankets, and he also refused to give me.
المحقق قال عندي بكل اللي بدي السلاح اللي عندك، انا عمري 17 سنه يعني ما بعرف شو السلاح، يعني يعني صدفت اشوفه ولا غير معهم ولا مع السلطه، ما بعرف شو السلاح. هاي بهدد فيي بكل اللي بتجيبش السلاح اللي عندك من طخ ابوك وامك، وابوي وامي يعني ما همش يشتروا لي سلاح يعطوهم بدل عشان يطلعوني. بكيت خايف كثير، بهدوني كل دقيقه يجي كل هيد ضاربهم، خايف كثير بكيت.
So the interrogator told me I would kill your mom and father. I would demolish your house if you don't give us your weapon. But Abed says that he never held any weapon. He doesn't know how a weapon, like how to use a weapon. His family, they cannot afford buying him a weapon. So, yeah, تفضل عبد.
من الخوف انا لما كان بدك تهد دارك وبقتل ابوك وامك وبقتلك، رحت نمت بس ما خفت، ما سكتش عمليش، ضليتني نايم خايف. كل صوت حوالين الباب انطز، افكر انه بدهم يجوا يطخوني ولا شيء، وانا سكعان وبلبل، وطلبت منهم اصلا من مره وقتها ما قبلوش يجيبوا لي.
After the interrogator left, I was so scared that I couldn't think of anything. I just slept, like slept. And whenever I heard something near the cell, I would wake up frightened. I thought they would come and kill me.
بعدها انا قررت اني موقف، لانه يعني هي يعني انا مسكعان قررت موقف. قعدت يومين بلا اكل ولا شرب، قبل ما بعد يومين جابوا لي حرامات.
So because I was feeling cold and they refused to give me blankets, I told them that I'm gonna stop eating whatever food they bring me until they bring me blankets. So I spent 2 days without food until they brought me the blankets I asked for.
وبعدها اجى عندي محقق ثاني بقول لي بقى عاملين لي فحص كورونا اول ما اخذوني، لو بقول عندك الفحص السليم طلع 100%. راح بعد بنفس اليوم طلعوا عملوا له فحص كورونا، بعد يومين اجى عندي المحقق ثاني بقول انا لما عرفت انه عندي كورونا خفت كثير، يعني كورونا سجن يعني عن ولا صغير. كنت تعبت يعني شو بدي اسوي، رحت نمت.
So at the beginning, they made the corona test for me, and the interrogator told me that or the officer told me that the result is negative. But on the same day, they made another test for me, and 2 days later, they told me that I was tested positive for corona. I was frightened because I was alone in a very cold cell, solitary confinement cell, that I didn't know what to do and what's going to happen to me.
لما صحيت ثاني يوم لما بعد ما نمت بكيت على كثير، قلت لهم ما جابليش شيء. قمت انا كيفت لانه عندي كورونا مشان انا اموت ولا اضل بالسجن.
عبد ما سمعتك.
مش غير اسهال وطلبت منهم يجيبوا لي دواء، ما حدش رد علي، ضلوا يماطلوا فيي وما جابوليش شيء. قمت انا لما عرفت انه عندي كورونا واني تعبت كيفت زياده مشان اموت ولا اضل بالسجن.
So I had some corona symptoms like fever, and I had fever. I was feeling cold. When I asked them for everything and they refused, I said, okay, whatever. I'd rather die of corona. I'd rather die of corona rather than stay in this cell.
مريض وتعبان ومش قادر اعمل اشي، كل شوي يجي يهددوني بابوي وامي، انا قلت لك اياهم وبقدر تجيب سلاح وعارف شو. بكيت بس يقولوا لي هيك صغير ومش عارف شو دعم.
They were coming the whole time, threatening the same threats, telling me that they will kill my family and demolish my house. And I sometimes cried because I was helpless. I didn't know what to do.
انا قعدت بهديك ولا دواء ولا شيء وحالي صعبة ومش عارف شو دعم، وكنت أتمنى الموت بدل ما ضلني قاعد. كان بعد 10 أيام حطيت فيهم بال10 أيام محكمتين، نقلوني بعد ال10 أيام إلى منطقة تانية من الغرفة، طلعوني من الغرفة ونقلوني من منطقة تانية، حكرشوني وطلعوني بالغرفة حطوا حديد.
So I stayed in that solitary confinement cell for 10 days. I appeared for the court twice. It was online, and afterwards they took me to another place after 10 days.
ردوا حطوني قفص وكلفشوني وانا تعبان ما اقدرش اشرب مش عارف شو وهم يخالعوا فيي بالقفص، طبقات راسي يضرب الحديد وانا بكيت تعبان كثير، يعني مربطيني وانا تعبان يعني بقدرش اشرب ولا بقدر اعمل شيء، ما بعرفش وين حتى بكيت. خدوني على غرفة ثانية.
They transferred me from that solitary confinement cell in a cage like the first time, but this time I was super tired because of coronavirus, And because I was already tired from the solitary confinement cell, I couldn't resist. They were beating me up the whole time, the whole way, like going from the first cell to the other place.
بعد حطوني بغرفة أوسع شوي يعني وأحسن، وأعطوني ميزان حرارة وأكسجين، بس بيلزمنيش يعني ما أعطونيش دواء. أطلب منهم دواء يقولوا لي اليوم وبكرة، كل يوم يقولوا لي نفس الشيء، أو البكرة أو العصر، وإيش شو يعني هذا.
They moved me to a bigger room and they gave me
يعني
okay, so they removed me to
قعدت
a
بهذيش الغرفة.
لحظة عبد. They removed Abed to a 9 square meter room, which was bigger than the solitary confinement cell. They provided him with a temperature tester and other device to check the oxygen level. Okay, Abed, تفضل.
وبعد وبعد يعني وانا بهذا هاي الحالة تعب والحمام ولا شيء 21 يوم ووعي بلبلات، ويعني الواحد تعب 21 يوم بدون حمام. ما عرفت بكيت يعني متعب كثير ومرهق. كنت خايف لو واحد بعد 12 يوم أقدر شو اسمه بإفراج عني. بس أنا لما سمعت إنه بالإفراج عني فرحت كثير. بدي أشوف إذا أبوي وأمي ماتوا ولا بعد ولا هدوا الدار. مشيت طول الوقت وانا بدون ولا تلفون ولا شيء، ولا بكيت اعرف شو صار برا.
So I was detained in that room for 12
وبعدها
days.
بعد ركبوني.
I was detained in that room for 12 days. I was already tired. I didn't have any shower or like anything during my stay in the during the detention in the solitary confinement cell. After 21 days, I was told that I'm gonna be released, and the first thing that I thought of was, did they demolish my home? I was also scared. This is what I was thinking of. Did they hurt my family? Did they demolish our house? عبد.
حتى وانا مروح حطوني بقلب القفص، كلب سيارة فيها قفص وكلبشوني، حطوا الحديد بدي وجراي خوف اني اخرج، وانا يعني ما بقدرش اخرج ولا بقدر اعمل شيء، بس هيك يعني انهم يحشروني بقلب القفص، فما لا اقدر اعمل ولا شيء. بعدها حطوني سلموني للإسعاف الفلسطيني.
On my release day, they even handcuffed me and put ties on my foot, even on my release day. I was helpless and tired, and they drove me to an ambulance for the Palestinian Red Crescent.
انا حطوني بعد اخذوني الاسعاف الفلسطيني، اخذتني على المستشفى الفحوصات وروحوني. كنت خايف اروح لا لاقي ابوي وامي والدار مهدوده لانه من كثر ما بكونوا يهددوا فيي. فلما رحت ولقيتهم دشعت عليهم صرت اعيط وحضنتهم.
So when the Palestinian ambulance took me and drove me home, I was thinking the whole time about my house and family. So when I arrived and saw that my family are all okay and healthy and that my home is still there, I was very happy. I ran towards them and started crying.
انا بعدني الحديث هسه بخاف منهم، يعني كل ما اسمع صوت بالليل بنط بالليل، يعني بضلني افكر انهم اجوا، بضلني احلم فيهم واتفكر يعني قصه سهله، يعني فاتوا عندي على الدار وطلعوا الباب وهذا، يعني بعدني الحديث هسه بخاف. كل ما ابكي فيها غيرتها.
Until this day, I am afraid of them. Whenever I hear something outside, I think that they came again to take me or detain me or arrest me. I dream of them sometimes. It is such a traumatizing experience.
لانه لما اعتقلوني فجروا الباب تفجير، واخو يعني كميات كبيره عندنا بالدار، يعني لو انه واحد ابصر شو ما جلوس هيك، وانا ولد صغير يعني ما فهم شيء.
When they arrested me, they exploded the door of the house, and I'm still a young boy. Like whatever anyone does, this is not the way they come and arrest them. And this is, I still remember.
والله تجربة صعبة كثير يعني قاعد بقى إنه ما حدش من الأطفال فلسطينيين يمر فيه يعني أنا صعبة كثير يعني
This is a
محدش
very
متصور قد ما يصعب قد ما أخرجهم على مش راح أوصف لكم.
This is a very harsh experience that I hope no Palestinian or any child could experience. No matter no matter what I say, I don't think I can deliver the feelings I had or I still have. تمام.
هاي قصة وشكرا لكم جميعا. شكرا لكم جميعا.
This is my story, and thank you all for listening to it.
Abed, thank you so much for telling us about your horrific experience. And I'm so appalled, and I'm so sorry that you've had to go through that. But it's very important that we all hear the important things you have to say. So thank you very much for showing such courage and talking to us. Mana, do you need to translate that for Abed?
عبد تشكرك تريزا، بتحكي لك شكرا لأنك شاركنا في تجربتك، والإشي المنيح إنه هي إحنا هون كلنا وعم نسمع.
And Mana, thank you very much for translating as well.
You're welcome.
Would Abed be okay about answering questions if people have questions? He doesn't have to if he doesn't want to.
عبد ممكن في ناس يسألوا أسئلة، بدك تجاوب؟ مش مضطر تجاوب، بس إذا بتحب.
بحب.
Yeah, he doesn't mind. He would like to answer if there is any question.
Okay, thank you. I've got a couple of questions already that people would like answers to, but I'm feeling I'm feeling a bit tearful after listening to that, I have to say. I'm imagining all the children that I know of Abed's age, including my own, and I'm very, very, I feel upset about it. Anyway, just pull myself together. And yes, you had a question. Would you like to unmute and ask a question?
Okay, I think, in the context, it seems like quite an absurd question, really. But do children who stay in detention for longer receive any schooling or training whilst they are in detention? I don't think Abed can answer that, can he? Maybe Sausan or...
Yes, I can answer that. So obviously, arrest and detention doesn't just adversely impact the psychological well-being of children, it really affects their educational development. The Israel Prison Services educational program for Palestinian children is paltry, it's punitive, it does not respect the right to compulsory education, and kind of critically, it doesn't correspond to the Palestinian curriculum. So classes are very infrequent throughout the week. They're often limited to maths and Hebrew or Arabic. There are often no textbooks, and they're not grade appropriate, so children can be educated with children who are 4 years older or younger than them in the same room. So unfortunately, Palestinian schools often count days spent in Israeli prisons as absences, and that means that children sometimes have to repeat a grade once they're released. So the kind of sporadic and inadequate education that Palestinian child prisoners in the Israeli military detention system experience means that their reintegration back into their community and their school is incredibly difficult once they're released. Some of them choose to drop out of school, others are forced to repeat a grade, as I mentioned, and all while obviously kind of carrying the burden of all of this invisible trauma that they've accumulated during detention. Symptoms of PTSD might impede their ability to learn or to focus at school, and we often hear from children that they experience frequent nightmares and sleep disturbances. So the kind of denial of education for Palestinian children in these facilities only prolongs the suffering of these children way beyond their release date.
Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. I have a question for you from Linda Ramsden, who has had to just take a quick call. And she asks, as you're the DCI rep for the UK, have people here arranged for you to brief members of Parliament? We know that we can approach our MP on this issue, but with you here, it would be powerful for you to have the opportunity to brief them, including those in the Foreign Office. And do you work with other child charities here, such as Save the Children, all ways to help tell the story of what's happening to Palestinian children? Thank you.
Yeah, so we have great relationship with quite a lot of MPs here already, which is great. We brief the Foreign Office fairly regularly. I briefed them on Wednesday or Thursday this week, I think, about the COVID cases that I mentioned, about Amal Nakla's detention, and also about the alleged rape and torture of a child under interrogation on January 13th, which I didn't talk through earlier. There's more information on our website if you would like to read about that particularly disturbing case. And then in terms of other organisations that we work with, we do work with Save the Children in the UK, Europe and OPT. We also work with Lawyers for Palestinian Human Rights, War and Want. I saw that CABU has been mentioned in the comments. So we do work with quite a lot of other organisations here in the UK already, but all great suggestions, so thank you.
Thank you. Brooke, I don't know if you want to ask your question or if you were just putting a comment in the chat.
No, I would like to ask it if Abed doesn't mind. Hello, Abed. Marhaba and shukran for your very brave presentation. And I'm wondering, since you talked about how you feel now, if you could tell us if you're getting any help going through this post-trauma period. Are you getting any kind of accompaniment, any kind of therapy, any kind of help to reintegrate into social life of where you live?
عابد معنا. عابد. عابد. عابد بتسألك بعد الاعتقال انت هلا عم بتمر يعني بالصدمة هاي اللي انت فيها، في اي حدا بيساعدك، اي مؤسسة انك تتخطى هذا الاشي النفسي اللي انت عم تتعرض له حاليا؟
لا ليش حدا.
بتحب تحكي اكثر كيف انت عم بتساعد حالك مثلا اذا ما في حدا؟ عبد. He says no one, no organization, no one is helping him to get over this experience.
Really, because
yeah.
I remember when I was working in Nablus that I did meet a man who was working with young Palestinian prisoners once they got out of prison to help them to readapt. So I'm very sorry that Abed is not able to profit from something of the kind. Thank you for answering, Abed.
أبوي وأمي وأخوتي.
Did Abed understand Brooke's last?
عبد تقدر تسمعنا؟
نعم.
لأنه الإنترنت عندك شوي ضعيف صح؟
ما سمعت.
هم بس لأنه مستغربين إنه أنت لهلا يعني ما حصلت على أي دعم نفسي من أي مؤسسة أو أي جمعية أو أي شيء يعني
لا ولا من أي شيء ولا من...
No?
لا.
He said that no, he didn't receive anything.
Did he hear what Brooke had to say after that? She mentioned.
Yeah, I translated it. Yeah, you can't continue when I sorry for interrupting.
No worries. عبد كانت بتحكي بروك إنه لما كانت هي بنابلس كان في شخص بيساعد الأطفال اللي بيتعرضوا للاعتقال إنهم يتخطوا التجارب هاي اللي مرقوا فيها. فهي كانت تسأل إذا أنت بتعرف عن هذا الشخص أو حدا ساعدك زيه.
لا فيش حدا ساعدني.
بس أوكي تمام. أنت ما بتعرف عن حدا بنابلس أو مؤسسة؟
لا.
أوكي تمام. So Abed says that he doesn't know the person Brooke was talking about, and he didn't receive any help from anyone regarding his experience.
Okay, thank you. I'm very sorry.
Sorry to hear that.
Yeah, thank you. Flavia, would you like to unmute and ask your question?
Yes. Hello, Abdet. Of course, we could see with you the terrible time you had, and I just wanted to know what were you holding on to every day to try to survive? Were you thinking about your family? Were you just thinking moment by moment? What do you remember was helping you the most in those days?
Thank you. عبد بتسألك لما أنت كنت بالمعتقل هلأ وأنت هلأ برا إيش بتتذكر أكتر إشي ساعدك تتخطى هداك الوقت؟ كنت بإيش تفكر أكتر شيء؟ بعيلتك كنت تفكر بكل لحظة بلحظتها؟ إيش أكتر إشي ساعدك تمضي الوقت الصعب بالمعتقل؟
الكورونا أكثر ساعدتني لأني بكيت تعبان كثير وما حستش يعني ظني نايم أغلب وقتي.
ولما كنت
يعني بكيت بس لما كنت أصحى بكيت أفكر بأبوي وأمي ذات ولا شو بقيت أفكر أكثر إيش إني أموت ولا أضل بهاي الزنزانة يعني.
So Abed says that Corona helped him, hold on to what he has been through because he was most of the time tired. He was sleeping most of the time, but whenever he woke up, the only thing that he was thinking about is his family, his mother and father and their house. So basically, that's it. He was either sleeping because he was tired of Corona or awake thinking of his family.
Thank you. Pamela, would you like to unmute and ask your question?
That's it. Thank you very, very much, Abed. It's a terrible story. I was struck how brave you were to threaten to go on hunger strike under those circumstances. So my question is, what is happening to your friends and schoolmates and companions where you are? Are they experiencing similar things to you? Thank you.
ثانك يو. أول شيء بشكرك لأنك شاركت القصة تاعتك وبتحكي لك إنك شجاع عشانك أضربت عن الطعام في ظل كل الأشياء اللي مرقت فيها، وبتسألك بخصوص أصحابك أو أولاد صفك الناس اللي قدك اللي بتعرفهم بيمرقوا بنفس الشيء، مرقوا بنفس الشيء أو
لا في منهم بس الخفيف يعني ياخذوا أشبال يعني صغار يحبسوهم.
So Abed says that not a lot of his friends or the people his age he knows that went through the same experience.
Thank you.
هم أنا باخذوا كثير شباب يعني، بس اللي صار فيه أنا ما صارش بحدا لأنه في كورونا مش كورونا.
Okay, what Abid says is that they take a lot of boys, but what he went through is different because he had corona while he was arrested and detained.
Thank you. Gwyn, would you like to unmute and ask your question?
First of all, thank you so much, Abed. It's been really important that we've heard you. I wanted to ask probably Sausen, when we visited Hebron and had a briefing from DCI in 2016, I think we learned that Palestinian parents actually have to pay for their children's food while they're in prison. And they also have to pay a fee to release their children at the end of their sentences. Is this correct?
It can be very expensive for families in a number of ways if their children are in prison. So there might be legal fees if children are released on bail or under the terms of a house arrest, but also things like traveling. So when parents were able to travel to see their children, bearing in mind that a lot of children are unlawfully transferred out of the occupied Palestinian territory into Israel, and parents might not even be able to secure a permit because of the kind of arbitrary and racist permit approval system. Even if they are able to travel, that can become incredibly expensive. So for families many of whom are already living in extraordinary poverty, having a child also in prison, but particularly in a prison in Israel, can kind of incur them some extraordinary costs during that time.
I've got a question from Ian who'd like me to ask. Maybe I could ask Sausen this. We know that part of the strategy of the Israeli military is to not just terrorize young people and terrorize their families, but also either to make it look as though they've become informers or to blackmail them or threaten them in order to do so. Could you tell us how common you think this is?
Well, the issue of informants is particularly sensitive. We think that probably more children are approached to be informants than tell us, but that, because of the sensitivity around the issue, a lot of them won't say that they've been approached. That's not to say that those children were approached and then became informants, of course, but the issue is incredibly sensitive. What actually often happens is that children are exposed to informants very often, but particularly children who were held in solitary confinement. So if you read our most recent report on solitary confinement, you'll see that in a lot of the cases, children were temporarily transferred out of solitary confinement to a cell where they had food and the cell conditions were much nicer, relatively so, and there they were approached by someone who claimed to be someone who's in a sort of leadership role in the prison, who asked them for information, and then whatever they did tell that person, sometimes the child realizes this is an informant and they don't speak to them, they're then usually threatened or kind of verbally abused by that adult, or they don't realize they might give them some information that's potentially incriminating, and then it's only when they're transferred back to solitary confinement, usually fairly quickly after that, and then taken to an interrogation room, that they are then presented with this, you know, potentially incriminating information that was extracted by an informant. So informants are something, adult informants are something that Palestinian children in the Israeli military detention system are exposed to quite frequently.
Thank you, Susan. Herbert has asked, Abed, could you tell us what could we do for you now? What do you need from us?
Abed?
Do you mind if I ask him the question myself?
Please do.
Thank you, Teresa. I will translate afterwards if you don't mind. I'll speak in Arabic. عابد، أول شيء بدي أتشكرك على الشجاعة إنك قدرت تحكي معنا اليوم، وحابة أقول لك إنه كل الناس اللي بالغرفة كتير متأثرين وهن كتير معك. وسؤالي لإلك، إذا هلأ الغرفة أنت معنا، شو الشيء اللي أنت بحاجة إله أو نحن بنقدر نساعدك فيه؟ I said, رح أترجم بالإنجليزي, okay? I said that thanked him for his courage, for the courage to speak to us. And I said how we are all in this room with him, very moved by everything he said. And that if there's anything that he would like to receive from us now, what can we do? تفضل عبد.
أنا بطلب إنه ما حداش من أطفال فلسطين يصير معه زي ما صار معي، بس هذا اللي بدي إياه. لأنه جد يعني ما حدش بيقدر يتحمل، يعني وضع صعب، ما حداش بيقدر يوصفه، حتى يعني قد ما قلت لكم يعني ما قدرتش من اللي صار معي.
So Abed says that the only thing he wishes for is that no Palestinian child, he hopes that no one of the children, of the Palestinian children, would go through what he has been through.
Thank you, Abed. I've had another question from Jen. Jen, would you like to unmute and ask your question?
Hi, I'm speaking on behalf of me and Jen. I just wanted to ask a quick question, and thanks to Abed, for sharing his story with us. But I'd like to know if Israeli and Palestinian children are held within like the same establishment, and if so, are they kept apart? And what about Israeli and Palestinian men? Do they go to separate prisons, or is there a combined prison for them both? Thanks.
Yeah, they are not at all held in the same facilities. And in fact, we did a comparison of how Israeli children are treated in Ofek prison and Palestinian children are treated in Megiddo prison, where we kind of cover every aspect of prison life. And I've now just pasted a link in the chat where you can go and read that. It was part of a 4-part series that we did about Palestinian children in Megiddo prison. So part 3 is about that. It's a direct comparison between how Israeli and Palestinian children in Israeli custody are treated.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So also I have a question from Sarah Sharif asking about the role of Israeli social services or child safeguarding services, if there are equivalents over there, and do they get involved with Palestinian children?
Not that I'm aware of. Once Palestinian children are released from Israeli facilities, they're usually released straight back into the occupied Palestinian territory, in which case it wouldn't be, appropriate and presumably possible for Israeli social services to be involved. We have at DCI private social workers who assist some children, and then of course there are kind of community social workers. But as I mentioned earlier, the capacity is completely insufficient to meet the sheer quantity and needs of the amount of children who are going through this system.
Thank you. Nikos, would you like to unmute and ask your question? Nikos Coleman, are you there?
Sorry, I was struggling with my computer. I really just wondered what were the reasons why children are first arrested there. Is there a sort of general nature of what the alleged crimes are, and can that be prevented, or are they just sort of discrimination?
Most children are accused of stone throwing offences.
Yeah, I assume that. Is it like, because then there's no hope of like rehabilitating anyone if they're actually not doing something wrong, or if you can't remove the causes of that, I guess.
Well, the system is not designed to be rehabilitative. It's designed to be punitive because, of course, it exists within a larger structure of occupation. So that it's not designed to be rehabilitative.
Okay, it doesn't even have the illusion of that, or.
Yeah, it reinforces a kind of a wider project, which is control over the occupied Palestinian territory. So, you know, it is a punitive system. Children, for the most part, are accused of throwing stones. Very often, children are simply in the vicinity of other children or youths or others throwing stones or clashes or something like that, and they're completely arbitrarily picked up and taken away.
Yeah, no, I understand. It's often because it's portrayed here, I suppose, as protests that have gone too far or reactionary to incidents, but we don't always know the wider context really here. And
I mean, we published just this week, maybe yesterday, in fact, a news alert on a case that really kind of exemplifies this practice. An 8 and a 10-year-old boy were riding their bikes outside the front of their house, and they were detained by Israeli soldiers and interrogated, sort of taken away from their house about 200 meters away, and interrogated by soldiers who accused them of throwing stones. You know, and the children had simply been playing with their bikes in their front garden. So it can be that arbitrary, and it often is that arbitrary.
Are they then entitled to a fair trial, like a hearing where evidence is presented, or they have legal representation during that, or?
No, so all Palestinian children in the West Bank are subject to Israeli military law. So they will be entered into a military court, which we know where essentially they will not receive a fair trial, and the trial will never meet the standards outlined, the kind of juvenile justice standards outlined by international law. If you're a Palestinian child in East Jerusalem, in theory, you're subject to Israeli civilian and criminal law, but we know in practice that Palestinian children are treated discriminately.
Yeah, I understand. Wow.
You, Nikos. Susan, and maybe others want to contribute to this. I wonder what the long-term consequences are for a young person who's been convicted by a military court, and of course there'll be many, many of them. How does it affect things like work permits, travelling through checkpoints to get to medical treatment centres? Is it something that blights their lives even more than they are already blighted if they've been held in military detention?
We haven't done a study on the long-term consequences for children, but I expect that, and I know from some cases that children who are arrested and detained may then become the target for, you know, future detentions, or maybe more likely to be picked up, or to find it more difficult to get through a checkpoint, as you mentioned. So But I because we haven't done a long-term study on children and how their experiences have affected the rest of their lives going into adulthood, I can't tell you specifically.
Thank you. Heather, do you want to ask your second question?
Thank you, Teresa. عابد، حابة أسألك لو عندك هلأ خيال تتخيل المستقبل، تتخيل حياتك، أو إذا عندك حلم حابب تحققه بحياتك أنت، شو بتفكر؟ شو خيالك للمستقبل؟ شو حابب تنفذ بحياتك؟ I asked if you had something to imagine or dream about in life.
نعيش بأمان بدون احتلال زي أيات البلاد الثانية، نعيش بأمان يعني فيش عندنا احتلال ولا إشي، ما نضلناش خايفين منهم. يعني الواحد ما بيقدرش يعمل إشي مش خوف منهم ولا إشي، يعني بيضل الواحد مرتعب منهم خايف. كل يوم تنأجوا عنا على البلد وصاروا يخالوا، وإحنا الأولاد الأطفال خاف يعني لا جيش وجنود وتخطف، وإحنا أطفال. بزتوا علينا يعني كنابل ومجهرات، يعني بنخاف كثير منهم.
So Abed says that he dreams of safety, like to be safe in order to grow up healthy, because they, like he and children his age experience not only detention but also other stuff like clashes or explosions near them. So what he dreams of and what he wishes for is safety for him and the rest of Palestinian children.
وأنا بدي دعم نفسي، يعني أبوي وأمي وأهلي يساعدوني، يعني هسه أنا بعدني خايف منهم، يعني بدي الناشط هذا حكى لي إنه في مؤسسات تقدر تساعدك نفسيا، وأنا بطلب إنهم يساعدوني نفسيا يعني عشان أتخطى هاي المرحلة وأرجع لوضعي الطبيعي.
Abed also says that he needs psychological support. He's talking about the man you mentioned. I don't remember who mentioned that he's in Nablus and he gives psychological support. So he wishes that someone like him, like that man himself or any other person, could help him get over this experience. Like he seeks psychological help.
بس المشكلة إنه يعني في كورونا والبلاد مسكرة، يعني المؤسسات بقدرنش يتعامل معي زي الأيام العادية عشان الكورونا.
So they think that the obstacle that he faces now is the corona. Like he cannot go for organizations in person and seek for this help. So he doesn't know where to go now, because there is a lockdown here in Palestine and everything is like almost everything is closed. So this is an obstacle for him.
Manal, could you tell Abed that we will think together about how we can do something to help him?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. بيحكوا لك راح يفكروا كلهم سوا كيف ممكن يقدموا لك المساعدة.
شكرا على ايش عملتوه معي.
Abed is saying thank you all for everything.
We're going to just wrap up this part of the event because we have a report about a day of action against JCB, which I'd really like Abed to hear about, so that he hears what people outside of Palestine are doing, that they're not forgotten. But first of all, I'd like to thank Abed very much for his incredible bravery, his sensitivity, and for coming and talking to us today and making some very, very important points to us. We very much appreciate that.